Let me go to the other side of Afghanistan and talk about Iran. Now, you did a series of blog posts a few weeks ago that talked about things you were hearing from within the think tank policy community in Washington about whether or not there was going to be a push for some sort of military action against Iran. And Iran obviously has talked about a lot with regards to the argument that they're interfering or trying to develop, more influence in Iraq. But this also has come up a lot in the U.S. press about what Iran is doing vis-a-vis Afghanistan. And I see these claims a lot that Iran is sending these, IEDs and various sort of low-tech explosives to be used against the U.S. military and NATO in Afghanistan, notwithstanding the fact that that would be across the Shia-Sunni religious divide. Do you find those basic charges credible, that Iran is playing that kind of role in Afghanistan?
Well, first, I think my short answer to that is, even if the charges are true, that's not why the administration is making them. Let's
Right.
put it in perspective. The government of Hamid Karzai came into power in Afghanistan through cooperation between the United States and Iran, period. It happened on the ground militarily. It happened in intelligence, and I saw it personally happening diplomatically at the Bonn talks, which formed the new government, where I was present as a member of the UN delegation, and that's quite well known. Iran was one of the principal supporters of the Northern Alliance, which was the same group that the United States funded and armed to fight the Taliban. So essentially, the U.S. joined a coalition that was supported by Russia, Iran, and India against the Taliban, who were supported by Pakistan. The government of Afghanistan, including President Hamid Karzai, is very clear that Iran has been playing a positive role. It has given $500 million in economic assistance. Iran has lost over 3,000 men fighting against drug traffickers coming from Afghanistan, and so on. Now, my impression is that within Iran, there is a difference of views among people about how to deal with Afghanistan in the future in the following sense. They believe that as far as Afghanistan itself is concerned, their best interest is to try to support the government of Hamid Karzai while strengthening the Northern Alliance's role in it, in order to keep al-Qaeda and the Taliban as far away from Iran as possible. And those mainly concerned with Afghanistan policy would like to shelter Afghanistan in a way from the U.S.-Iran conflict. There are others in Iran for whom the conflict with the United States is most important. And therefore, we saw a statement, for instance, last week by the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Jafari, saying that if the U.S. attacked Iran, it would respond against those who invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, meaning including in Afghanistan. And this led to some protests in the Afghan parliament. Now, if that is in fact the policy, then it means Iran is now putting a higher priority on trying to tie down or weaken its American enemy than it is in stabilizing Afghanistan. And it's possible, I know some reasonable people who believe that it's possible that Iran is giving some tactical or small level support to the Taliban in order simply to weaken Britain, which is actually in Western Afghanistan, and the United States. However, let's bear in mind one overriding fact. The Taliban are based in Pakistan. The Taliban support network, recruitment, funding, weapons, and leadership comes from Pakistan. So we should not get the idea that somehow the problems in Afghanistan are due to Iran. They're due, one, to the internal problems of Afghanistan, two, to the overlap of Afghanistan with Pakistan, and then thirdly to economic problems, and not really, and maybe Iran plays some small role, but on the whole, Iran has played a stabilizing role. I don't know if U.S. policymakers are taking into account the effect of their policy toward Iran on our effort in Afghanistan. Because if I may put it very bluntly, and I said this to some State Department officials recently, you can have a confrontation with Iran, or you can have a success in Afghanistan, but you cannot have both. I mentioned earlier that the parts of the country that are stable because are relatively stable because the power holders in those areas have decided for now to ally themselves with the government. But in most areas, those power holders are people who have been supported by Iran in the past. I won't say they're pro-Iranian, they're pro themselves, but they have been supported by Iran in the past, and it would be very easy for Iran to destabilize many parts of Afghanistan, including the capital city of Kabul. And if we move toward a confrontation with Iran, it could have devastating consequences for Afghanistan.
On that question of Iran, I think people in the U.S., we see these veiled threats and kind of a heat up of hostilities between the two countries. A lot of it, as you mentioned a few weeks ago in your blog posts, seems a lot like what we saw in 2002 when there was the sort of the buildup of agitprop and threats and everything like that with respect to Iraq. Is there anything that you have, based on just your knowledge of the region, or anything that you have learned since you did that writing, I guess a month or so ago, that gives you any more sense of what is happening in this buildup of tensions between the United States and Iran?
Well, it's difficult for me to be sure. I understand what's happening between the two countries. That is, in Iran, the hardline group is trying to assert its power and strengthen its monopoly on power by playing the nationalist card, and the nuclear program plays a very important role in that. The United States, the Bush administration has defined its war on terror so broadly that people who have nothing to do with September 11th or who opposed Al-Qaeda are being lumped into the same thing, and therefore they're seeing Iran as part of that same strategic threat, which it is not. It's a strategic challenge in a different way. And those two political imperatives are coming into a collision, which is worsened by Ahmadinejad's rhetoric about Israel and the Holocaust and so on, which I think which plays into the hands of the hardliners, and therefore we are seeing an attempt by a number of people, in particular hardcore neoconservatives who are not sufficiently embarrassed by Iraq as of yet, to try to launch a campaign for a preemptive war against Iran as well, and they know that they have to do it pretty soon, or it will be too late in the administration. There'll be another administration. I'm not convinced that the president himself, or whoever it is that actually takes decisions in this administration, has taken that decision as of yet. But certainly they have put together a force structure and a legal justification, so-called legal justification, and a political campaign to build support for it, which could be mobilized on short notice to carry out such an attack if such an attack took place. And the problem is, we now see some neoconservative writers saying it won't take place because of a decision by the United States. It will be because of a provocation by Iran. Now, given that we have U.S. troops engaged in wars on all the borders of Iran at the moment, it is not too surprising that there could easily be something that would be described as a provocation, which could then escalate and get out of hand and become an extremely dangerous conflict.